The night belongs to us. We will bathe in their blood and relish their screams.
Hi everybody, I'm Mark White. I'm the former Managing Director and Project Lead for Southampton Vampire by Night. So in this video I'm looking to cover my motivations and why I started the project. And I'm hoping that by discussing this you can see the reasons behind it. Why would you start a project like this? Why would you it's far easier to go and play a game than it is to try and create one. I think it's important before going into other videos to talk about the motivations of why it started, because I'm hoping that will set the scene as to literally why stick at it, why do what I did. So the easiest way to do it is to go kind of back to the beginning, and the beginning of all of this is that I played in a game in the UK called UKM, which was United Kingdom Masquerade, for about 15 years. It was a vampire LARP. It was a parlour LARP, meaning it was back rooms of a pub kind of thing, and community halls, that kind of stuff, which average game was between 10 to 30 players, and the game was made up of multiple domains being other cities that you could travel to, like physically travel to, and take your character to those games as well. So when I left, at its peak from when I was playing, you had a game in Southampton, Basingstoke, Sussex, Isle of Wight and Portsmouth. And the Southampton game, which is what I played in and then ran, took place on a Monday night, every Monday, and then the other games would be on a Saturday throughout the month, and they would take turns on playing each Saturday. So it was great. I really enjoyed it. As I say, it was great community of people, and some really, really fantastic memories. And it was something that, because it had been in my life for so long, became something I was quite precious about, meaning when you do something often enough, it becomes routine, part of you. If you don't do it, you feel like you're missing something. Weird way of saying it, but it was basically I'd been doing it for so long and been involved in it for so long that it just became part of like my daily, or kind of like my life. So when I saw the game declining and it looking like it could come to an end, I got concerned. And how I noticed that was, so like late 90s, the game was mega popular, and then I can't remember when I joined it. It must have been, was it in the 2000s? It must have been in the early 2000s that I joined. And then the game itself had been running for 25 years or so, or was running for about 25 years before it closed its doors. But it was it had a larger player base, and it had declined a bit. When I joined, it already started to decline, but I didn't know that. I was new into it, and I got to admit it was massively different from what I was actually currently doing as LARP. I was running around fields hitting people with foam swords and really enjoying that, and the idea or the concept of using rock paper scissors to me was just boring. But actually the game was really, really good. When I actually got into it and saw the political side of it, that was really cool. The PvP between players, that kind of political manoeuvring, I really enjoyed that. So, as I say, player base was starting to dwindle. We weren't getting new players coming in. A lot of the old guard were leaving because they were getting older and they had to move to different parts of the country, or work-life balance, etc., etc., or just didn't like the game anymore, or a particular reffing style or plot, or whatever it was. There was reasons. There's always reasons, but older players were leaving, newer players weren't coming in, and it was concerning. So UKM started to do like a bit of a drive to try to get some new players and new blood, and we did. We were successful. I would say we got across all the domains probably about 30 to 40 new players spread across all of them. With Basingstoke being part of the game, turning up, and the Isle of Wight coming back into the fold as well, was an influx of quite a few players. Problem was the honeymoon period didn't last. These new players came in and then they started to leave. And I believe one of the major reasons for that was that the older players that were still there had characters that were 15, 20 years old. And that meant that the XP that they had on their characters was a lot higher than these new players coming in. And although there wasn't gatekeeping of such, but there was. Gatekeeping, for those who don't know, is when older players bully younger players into either doing what they want them to do, killing their characters, or saying things have to be a certain way, or it's basically it's bullying. So although there wasn't obvious, it was definitely there. Because what was happening was that newer players were feeling more and more frustrated that they couldn't compete with these older characters, and especially there was a large attrition of younger players' characters dying compared to older player characters, and there was a reason behind that. And I overheard this, and basically older players, or some of the older players, were basically saying, if my character was to die, I'd stop playing the game. I've got no interest in playing a new character. So the refs knew that if those characters were to die, or they asked them to retire them and play something new, that they would lose that player. Now in most games it's not a massive issue, because you just go, okay, hopefully you'll come back in the future. But unfortunately the cost of the venues and other things meant that we relied on the player base, and the older players were a stable kind of income, because we'd only charge the players like £3 or £4 a game, and the venues were costing £30 to £50 a night, so you had to get a certain amount of players through the door to ensure you paid for the venue that night, because if not, it came out the ref's pocket. And if you were lucky to have a slush fund, it would come out of that. So if for a particular reason you ran a game and you were expecting a minimum of 10 people to turn up and only 5 did, you've got to pay for the rest of the ticket, the rest of the venue cost. And so anyway, that meant that it was difficult to handle the situation between the newer players coming in and these older players. So refs, especially myself, we started to create plot lines designed for younger players and plot lines designed for older players, because if you try to design a plot line for everybody, it would either be too easy or too hard, basically for either end of the spectrum. If it was too hard, you normally kill a younger player, and if it was too easy, then the older player would just stomp all over it and be able to just click their fingers and solve the entire plot. So you had to kind of design two types of plot, and then you had to try to be careful to not railroad but steer players away from it. So you had to try to prevent the older players from getting involved, and you had to try to prevent the younger players from getting involved in the older player plots because of reasons, of course. It was really difficult to manage, and it was a lot of stress and pressure on the refs. So refs were getting burnt out, because you were running these regular games, And with a lot of the older refs stepping away, went a lot of the old kind of meta plot information, and we were having to kind of recreate it. And to some of the newer refs, that was fantastic because they wanted to get rid of all the old stuff and start afresh. But for some of the refs, that old stuff is what they were using as source material for plots they were running in their game. So then you started to have the issue of the domains themselves started to become more fractured with the ref teams, meaning the ref teams would deal with their own domain but be less inclined to have conversations and talk about plot with the other domains. Now, during all of this, there was times when we all reached out, tried to have a sit-down conversation and sort through it all and all the rest of it, but it wasn't working out because, as I say, it was quite a stressful time period. And so that was all the things that were kind of going kind of wrong. There was loads of things that were going right. The game was thoroughly enjoyable, but as I say, I could see that UKM was going to come to an end, and that scared me. So that was the initial motivation behind me starting the project, was that I went, I've got to do something, otherwise I'm not going to have a vampire LARP to play in. And I wanted to have a vampire LARP to play in, and I felt that I owed it to, especially the two refs from Southampton, I owed it to them to to carry on the kind of game. So initially the project was to try to reinvigorate, reinvent and keep going UKM. And that, if I'd have handled that better, I think it may have worked, but I handled it poorly. And by saying I handled it poorly is because what I did is I wrote down everything that was wrong with the game, everything that needed changing, and then I came to one of the big open games that we used to hold at a castle in St Breville's Castle in Wales, and we used to meet up there yearly and have this big blowout where all the courts would come together. And during some of the downtime during one of those, I came in with my big list of things and had the other Southampton refs with me, and we kind of sat down with everybody and went through this list, and it was basically me just going, this is bad, needs to be changed, this is bad, needs to be changed, if you don't change this, this will happen, etc, etc. These are all of the things we should do. And it could have been handled better, and the aftermath of it could have been handled better, because the ref teams, although were resistant to major changes, could see what I was saying was on the cards, but didn't agree with all the changes that I wanted to implement, had their own ideas. This meant that what was then happening on the aftermath of it was, what I could see was, if we implemented all these things, everything would be okay, but because we keep on changing all of these things, like, for example, the rule system we were going to use, or the rules in that rule system change, or how we were going to do social media, who was going to be responsible for XYZ, how we were going to do funding, little things like this, it meant that because of that resistance, things became very stressful very quickly for me, because if you turn up with a recipe to make a cake and everybody keeps on changing the ingredients, you're not going to end up with a cake. And so I became more and more frustrated, and that's when I made the choice to go, right, I need to step away from UKM, and I need to start a project and create my own LARP system, utilising all the things that I was talking about and putting them into that. And that was really bad of me to just go, like, toys out the pram, fuck it. Stop changing my damn ingredients. I'm out. I'm going to bake my own cake over here. I really regret that. Because it was a horrible, horrible way to leave the thing that I was desperate to try to keep going. and unfortunately it didn't survive COVID. So UKM, as far as I'm aware, it won't be starting up again. And yeah, and of course my project didn't succeed either. So, you know, maybe some of the things they were saying were correct, that I was so desperate to be the chef with the cake that I didn't take into fact that what they were saying may have been the right thing to do. So massive regrets, and really apologetic to everybody involved in that situation that I handled it the way I did. And hopefully at some point we can all sit down and have a conversation about it. And, you know, yeah. So motivations leaving then, or motivations for the project, were all based on that I didn't want Vampire Larp to come to an end in the UK. So with my cake recipe and you know, the motivation that what I was saying was right, we started the project. And some advice I could give at this point would be, there were two things wrong with how I started. It's incredibly important you have passion for what you do. And I had a lot of passion for this project. Yeah, I was incredibly passionate. But I felt I was obligated to do this project and to have it succeed, and obligated to the community. And I felt that this was I had to do it, because if I didn't do it, there'd be no Larp, there'd be no Vampire. And so I didn't want to see that. And I felt obligated to the refs that had ran the game for so long, and the players that I knew enjoyed the game so much. I just wanted it to succeed. And so when things got rough, that was always the thing that held me there to go, no, I've got to do this, I've got to do this. Now, that's really fucking unhealthy. If you do start a project, don't have that mentality. You do not owe anybody anything. Never feel you do. And do it because you're enjoying it and it's fun. And unless, of course, you're doing it because it's a business and it's financial and all of that. Sometimes, yeah, you've got to work fucking hard to earn your money. But if this is just a project that is for fun, and you don't owe anybody, and you really got to remember that, because if you don't, as I'm going to cover in future videos, it will really mess you up, and it will keep you in bad places for long periods of time, because you'll be desperate to not let people down. And when you do let them down, if the project fails like mine did, fuck me, will it hurt. Wow. So yeah, don't do that. That's important. Make a project, be passionate, go through with it, enjoy it. Goddamn, enjoy it. But don't feel you owe anybody anything. And another bit of advice would be, and this one is good. This one is the thing that hurt me the most. I was desperate to leave a legacy. So the group of friends that I had, and still do to some degree, some of them had done things like created LARP events like Cold Horizon, or created groups in LARPs, or had just generally just done things in their life that meant that people will always remember them for that, and the positivity and fun that it offered to people. And little things like you could just mention it and people would know who it was that did it. And I was desperate for that. I wanted to have that kind of leave my mark, you know, leave something, that legacy behind. And this was it. This was going to be my thing. This was the first time in my life that I had been really fucking driven to do something. And so, you know, it was like I was putting all of myself into this. This was 100%, like, no matter how many hours or how much it was going to cost me and how much strain it put on my relationships and friends and the rest of it, I was determined to see this through and for it to be successful. Because I thought of it as like it was my baby. You know, this was important. Since becoming a father, I mean, I was a dickhead for thinking the way I did. You know what I mean? Family is I don't want to go into this whole harpy, you know, but family is where you leave your legacy. How you know, not a fucking vampire project. So yeah, and your friends and the relationships you build and stuff like that. That's where you leave a legacy. But anyway, so don't start projects with that kind of mentality, you know. That's some advice I could definitely give. But yeah, so those are my motivations. It was coming from a place of definite of love, meaning I just didn't want Vampire Larp to disappear. So that's why I did this. That's why I started the project. So yeah, hopefully you found that useful. And there's going to be loads more of these videos coming out. There's so many parts of the project I'm really looking forward to covering. This was literally just what motivated me to do the project. So yeah, so more videos coming soon. Please subscribe, and hopefully you've all enjoyed it. If you have, put a comment. I like the interaction. I like comments and stuff like that. Mean that I'm not just talking to myself, I'm talking to you, the viewers. You know what I mean? Likes are fantastic, but it's your comments that make this worth it, because I can actually have like a bit of feel like there's people out there. So yeah, anyway, I love you all, and I'll see you again. Bye.